So we're going to break down, so the transpiration stream, which we're going to look at the overview of, is the net movement of water from the roots, as we said, to the leaves. But in order to understand how it works, we have to start our study, our journey from the leaf, what happens at the leaves. And we have to be able to understand that it's as important as it is for plants to absorb water through the roots, it's as important to lose that water through the leaves, for that water to evaporate. So basically, water evaporates into the air spaces between these spongy mesophyll cells. So a little bit of a revision on your structure of your leaf. So we've got here, upper epidermis, waxy cuticle. Here are our palisade mesophyll cells right here. And here are our spongy mesophyll cells. And as the word suggests, they've got air gaps between them. If you remember, those air gaps also facilitate gas exchange, because they facilitate the movement of carbon dioxide from the stoma. This down here is the stoma. Stoma, or singular. Stomata, the plural. Again, for those that you might not know, stoma means mouth in Greek. So they're essentially the leaf's mouth, because that's where gas exchange takes place from. Here we have our vascular bundle, which will include both xylem and phloem vessels. However, here in this particular example, we're going to focus on the xylem vessels here. So what happens to water then? What is the path that water takes? It's going to, so first step is that water evaporates from the xylem vessels that is being carried into the leaf, it goes into the cells of the spongy mesophyll, and then let me just do this in another color so you can see a bit more clearly. It will evaporate. So here is my right 10. Here is my sort of step number 1, that water evaporates here. Now, be careful of one detail in terminology here. A lot of students are tempted to say that the evaporation of water is from the inside of the leaf to the outside, to the atmosphere. No. Evaporation technically means water going from liquid to a gaseous state. And technically, since these here are air gaps, water has already gone through from a liquid to a gaseous state. So evaporation is right here into the spongy mesophyll cells. This is a common mistake. Second step is that water then exits the leaf through the stomata down a water vapor potential. Water vapor, right? It exists as water vapor in here, and it exists as water vapor out here in the atmosphere. So there's a water vapor potential, a gradient, meaning what? A higher concentration of vapor inside the leaf than outside in the atmosphere. Finally, so we call the loss of water from leaves and other aerial parts of the plant is called transpiration. So the combination of all of these things that we have, that we've just described, right? Evaporation and then diffusion, basically, of water vapor out of the cell. Both those events together are called transpiration. Okay. What's the difference between the term transpiration and the term transpiration stream? The term transpiration stream involves the entire flow of movement of water. Let me just do this in blue. From the roots to the leaves. That whole thing is the transpiration stream. However, if the word transpiration alone means what is happening at the leaves, the combination of evaporation and diffusion of water vapor out of the leaf. So water first is lost by the leaves, and that causes a negative pressure within the xylem. And this negative pressure is what is called the transpiration pull. So the fact that we create a negative pressure means that water will be sucked up eventually, it'll be pulled from the roots. So therefore it's drawn up the xylem from the roots to the leaves under tension. Okay, keep that word tension because we're going to see towards the end of the session what the cohesion tension theory is and how it explains the transpiration stream. So again, don't worry too much about the negative pressure. And so the reason why water can be drawn up the xylem in the first place is because of these fundamental properties of water that you have learned back in the chapter when you were learning about water and its properties, which are the adhesion and cohesion. Adhesion and cohesion, guys, is basically just another name for the intermolecular forces, especially for those of you taking chemistry, the intermolecular forces between water molecules. So cohesion is basically the forces between water molecules, which are the intermolecular bonds or the hydrogen bonds that you've learned between water molecules. And the adhesion forces are the forces that develop between water molecules and the walls of the container, in this case, of course, the xylem vessels. Forces between water molecules and xylem vessels. Adhesion forces are basically, if you look at a glass of water and you can see that the water forms like a little bit of a meniscus, that's because of the adhesion forces of the water to its walls of its container. The adhesion and cohesion forces mean that the stream of water is in one continuous or unbroken column, as we say. If you're in Edexcel A, you don't need to know about adhesion, but you do need to know about cohesion. So as we say, the entire flow through the xylem is what is known as the transpiration stream. Okay. Let's now see what is happening at the other end of things. So we saw what's happening at the leaves to deplete water from the plant. Let's look at what's happening at the roots to replace that water that's being lost. So water enters the roots by osmosis. Never get tempted to say that water moves by any other mechanism, right? Water, osmosis, always. From a high water potential to a low water potential. Yeah, that's how osmosis works. Water moves from high to low water potential. There are three pathways that water can take to move from the soil to the root and then eventually to the xylem vessel, which remember, the xylem vessel, remember, if we took a cross section of the root, sits right at the center of the root, right? Whereas the root hair cell is here at the surface of the root. And so water effectively has to travel from the soil all the way to the xylem vessel here at the center of my root. So what is the path that it can take to do that? So we've got three different paths. If you're AQA and Edexcel A, you don't need to know the names of the different pathways. OCR and Edexcel B, you do. So we have, it's quite important that I can use the right colors here. So we have, if we look at these green arrows here, we have what is known as the apoplast pathway. So in green arrows. What is the apoplast pathway? It is basically water moving through the, what are these? The cell walls. Cell walls, remember, are made of cellulose, and cellulose is an incredibly hydrophilic molecule, meaning that water can sort of really easily diffuse through it. It's basically what happens if you take a piece of paper and you dip one corner of it, one end of it in water, you'll be able to see the water like kind of absorbing up. What's the second type of transport? The rest of the two types of transport are actually quite similar. And we've got the Symplast pathway in red. Symplast pathway in red. And then we've got the vacuolar pathway in blue. So what does that mean? It means that water actually enters the cell, whereas in the apoplast pathway, it hasn't even entered the cell at all, right? It hasn't even passed the cell membrane. It's literally just traveling outside across the cell walls. Symplast and vacuolar means that the water has entered the cell. And symplast just simply means that it's traveling through the cytoplasm. And vacuolar means that it's also crossing the vacuoles inside the cell. So similar in that respect. We have an adaptation called the Casparian strip, which is found usually at some point. Let me just do it in red so you can see it. It's usually found, so if this is my root hair cell, it's usually found somewhere here, like at the end of this pathway. And what it does is that the Casparian strip is made of a waxy substance. And I know that waxy substances don't allow water to move through them. And so what it basically effectively does is that it forces the water to quit the apoplast pathway and to force it to travel intracellularly, which is important to be able to control its movement more. Let's have a look at an example question. So the xylem vessels are responsible for transporting water throughout the plant. Water is drawn at the roots and supplied to the leaves through the transpiration stream. Describe what happens to the transpiration stream if the xylem vessels are broken. So again, you're going to have a go at this, but first, context, the xylem and the transpiration stream right here. My command is describe, which basically means to, state or outline with no explanation needed. And my direction is to focus on the effect on the transpiration stream only, not the plant as a whole. So with that in mind, have a go. Okay, let's look at the answer together. Cutting the xylem vessels will allow air into the xylem, effectively disrupting the transpiration stream and breaking the cohesion forces between the water molecules. So as we said, the cohesion and adhesion forces have to be in a continuum in order to allow the uninterrupted movement of water up the xylem, which is effectively moving against gravity, right? So one mark goes for saying what's going to happen to the xylem vessel. It's going to disrupt the transpiration stream. And the second mark goes for explaining what is going to happen to the cohesive forces between water molecules.